Pete, over the last several years, Detroit's been in whipsaw mode. It's not the movie. It was a good movie. They're trying to figure it out. First, they go all in on autonomy. Wah, wah. That failed. Then they go all in electrification. Wah, wah. We don't know where that's going. And now Detroit's trying to figure out the rise of China and then tariffs. What's Detroit's current thinking? What's the on-the-ground thinking since you're based there?
I think the mood has shifted from growth in those mobility areas to more defensive posture. How do we deal with these threats that you just outlined? China, tariffs, EV bets that haven't paid off yet. How do you get to that EV future if you want to continue going there? So I think that the mood in Detroit is rolling with perma-crisis, as McKinsey called it, and how do they continue and bridge into the future at this point? But I think it's a move from optimism to defensive posture over the last couple of years, and certainly now with tariffs.
The defensive posture, does that now shift Detroit back to their bread and butter, their profit machine of the SUVs and the pickup trucks?
I think that's a pretty good guess as to where many automakers will wind up, Grayson. It'd be hard to argue against that. We saw BP just within the last day or so, cut off and end its mobility bets in hydrogen and some battery electric work. So I could definitely see Detroit doing the same thing where, it's time to circle the wagons around your core product. And that's pickup trucks and SUVs right now. At the same time, they have to find a bridge to a future that still feels electric, regardless of the current tumultuous situation.
Could we potentially see more hybrids come out of Detroit over the coming years?
Yeah, I think no question that we'll see that. And that's been the talk for the last 6 to 8 months, right? That they're shifting a lot from full battery electric to hybrid, plug-in hybrid. The Volt technology might be used again from GM. We've heard a lot about e-revs. So I do feel like that shift was already underway. Like they went too far in on full battery electric before consumers really understood it, before the infrastructure is ready. So regardless of what we now see, which I think is real crisis in the auto industry with the tariff situation, I think that shift back toward hybrid was already underway and probably maybe even accelerates now.
Going back, not assigning blame, the previous White House, there was a lot of regulatory to go to full battery electric where hybrid was considered this boogeyman. Where hybrid, if you look at it from a carbon perspective, an environmental perspective, it's very good. It's called middle solution to get you to full battery electric. But Detroit just filed the previous administration went all in on battery electric, and now they're paying the price. When does Detroit say, you know what, the hell with policies, we have to do what's right for our business and just continue to go and follow the consumer and ignore the overarching pressure of policy?
It's a great question, and I feel like more than anything, what Detroit automakers need is policy certainty, that this is going to be the policy for the next 10, 15 years and not be whipsawed, as you kind of called it at the outset here, back and forth between very different policies. And I feel like in some ways they're going to pick some middle ground on their own, and that will be their version of the hell with it. Here's what we're going to do, while couching for potential changes somewhere down the road and couching for the fact that if they want to be global players, they're still on an electrification path in Europe and China anyway. So I think that is kind of the big overarching push, and whether the US wants to go along with that, whether they want to be global automakers and kind of return to competition in those continents, then they have to go electric. So they can't go fully backwards. I think there's a mix, and that probably comes at some cost if they have to really invest in hybrid, plug-in hybrid, full battery electric. That's a lot to handle, especially at this time.
Tariffs, if done correctly, will level the playing field. GM Ford will be able to export into Europe, potentially, without tariffs. If the playing field is leveled, question there. If it is leveled, does GM Ford just export all their electric vehicles to Europe and to APAC just because of the level playing field now? Because the American consumer clearly does not have an interest in it outside of Tesla?
I'm going to disagree with that latter part, but we'll come back to that. I think the playing field is not so much the issue to me as I feel like Detroit walked away from making compact cars or sedans, period, and they're products weren't competitive overseas, whether you're talking China or Europe. Like Detroit willingly walked away from that part of the market. So I think the issue is that they don't have competitive product, much more so than playing field right now. And if you want to get to that part, they better build the cars first.
And if you look at the European market versus the US market from a design perspective, the vehicles in Europe are smaller, they're compact. The vehicles in America are oversized, which Americans like. It just seems to be, from not putting my economic hat on, just putting my reality hat on, spending a lot of time in Europe, that the vehicles will not translate well there because they can't fit into the parking spots, because a lot of those roads are very, very narrow and the parking spots are few and far between. The ones you can get are very, very tiny.
I think that is a practical issue, and one reason why American products have fallen out of favor overseas. I think that in some way the American automakers need to start making sedans and cars again, if only to address the affordability problem. Right now, cars are internal combustion engine vehicles are an average of $48,000-$49,000 a pop. That's, of course, going to increase with the tariffs. And I think that there's an affordability problem that simply must be addressed. Otherwise, they have ceded, again, the market for smaller vehicles to Chinese competitors or competitors from just about anywhere else. And that's one of the hearts of this problem right now.
There's a massive affordability problem. The other issue for that is there's an insurance affordability issue outside of the vehicle. There's the rising cost of insurance, which is astronomical. And for the record, we do need tort reform. And I want to get back to the electrification comment. When I said that Americans aren't embracing electrification, the reason I said it because having used a J plug and now a NACS plug, the J plug, the network is horrible. The vehicles are overpriced. You have to go to a dealer to maintain it, to do the software updates, no less. And the charging network was broken. Where if you look at the NACS plug with Tesla, I own a Tesla now. I don't drive it. It drives me. It just works. Big difference there. Once you experiment a traditional electric vehicle made by traditional OEM versus a Tesla, it's night and day.
No question. I think that all the pain points you just outlined are reasons that the electrification transition here in the US has been sluggish. Though at the same point, it's about 9% of the market right now. It's going up. It's nothing to sneeze at. It's not I think, like, looking back 5 years at some of the predictions that were made that we'd be at 25% market share by 2025 now seem ludicrous, right? We should go back and look at what every consulting firm said in 2015 to 2020 and hold them to that, because I think it was all very lofty and over optimistic, and that's very clear right now. And I do think, to go back to, there's some traction here. We're at about 9% of the market, and you are seeing automakers beyond Tesla roll out some interesting product. I think giving credit to GM for the Blazer and the Equinox in particular, I think are very competitive products. And I have to say, full disclosure here, I think that in part because I just bought one. Got ahead of the tariffs, saw it coming. Bigelow family was thinking about a purchase in August. One of those people who pulled it forward into March, and have liked what I've seen with our Equinox so far. I think for the price we paid, which was mid-30s, it's a very competitive vehicle, getting 319 real-world miles of range. So I think the product part has been slow to develop overall, but it's getting there. No question, the charging infrastructure out there is terrible. I'd say about 70% of the chargers I have tried in the public sphere in my first month of ownership here have resulted in failed attempts to charge. So it's really bad. How do we continue to address those things? I think, we had one very different answer from the previous administration than we do the current one. So that again, coming back to automakers in flux, that there's a lot that's very uncertain right now.
There's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of optimism on the horizon. And when you remove the screaming headlines from the talking heads on CNBC and Bloomberg, and you go down to a factory line and you actually talk with individuals working, they're very happy. We have Trump's polling numbers. This is Gallup, by the way, 49%. I'll go on the record and say if this holds, he's probably going to go over 51%. just because of the legions of Americans that were tired of the globalization. And when you look at all this massive uncertainty, especially economic uncertainty, people are worried about about their paychecks. You're worried about the price of the car. You're worried about the price of insurance.
Worried about their falling 401ks and 529 plans today. Here we are on Monday, April 7th. I don't know what the market will be by the time this comes out, but it's looking very scary today. So I would add that to the list of worries.
You want to take it one step further, look at the 90-day delinquencies on auto loans, look at the 90-day delinquencies on credit card payments. You look at a rising interest rate environment. The Fed looks like they're going to hold steady. Then they're not going to blink there. And so you have this emerging trend. You have David Risher, CEO of Lyft, is out there talking a lot about this, about a Lyft-ready AV. I had Jeremy Bird on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he spoke about these vehicles being Lyft-ready. When do we get to a point where Detroit, the big traditional auto manufacturers, partner with Uber and Lyft for personally owned AVs, where it's built to a certain spec? So let's say you pay $35,000, $32,000, and then when you're not using that personally owned AV, you can put it on the Lyft network or the Uber network to make money to pay your lease payment, to pay your insurance payment, and perhaps at the end of the month, you made a few bucks. When do we get to that point? Because that could become a really good economic growth engine, and it could solve a lot of individuals' affordability crisis when it comes to buying a new vehicle. And I'll point out to our listeners and viewers, buying a vehicle for a lot of individuals, the largest purchase they'll ever make in their life.
That's very true. When do we get to that point? I think Tesla's going to pioneer that, right? We're going to see that maybe starting in Austin as soon as this summer, as they roll out the first of the Robotaxi network there. Where are the other American automakers with that? I think at best they're far behind. And maybe that's by choice. Maybe that's we're going to wait and see and be followers on that particular, sales model or business model. I don't know, Grayson, like that. I'll be very curious about that, because I think there's a few people who can pull that off, but there's others like, if I had a Tesla, or if you did, like if your kid's like sports equipment's in the back, how clean are you going to keep that car? Like there's a friction with the convenience of just having my car be for me and my stuff is out there versus I'm now using it to generate income, which is great, but that takes time to clean it and have it ready. And maybe it reduces the convenience factor of always having it ready to use it when you want to use it. I think there will be some people who go for that, but I don't know that's going to be a huge driver. Do you remember a few years ago? This is what I'm thinking about. It's dating myself. I was going to say it's 5 years ago. There's probably more. Ford tried to do some sort of like flexible leasing model in Austin, Texas, where you could essentially fractional leasing. You split the car with somebody else or a couple of other people. I don't think they had more than like a half dozen takers on that. It was an interesting idea and a quick failure. And in some ways, I feel like the challenges they faced with that are similar to the ones that would take place now, even as you make it a Robotaxi, machine-driven vehicle.
Well, if you look at it from Lyft perspective, Lyft has flex drive, so they can service the vehicle and clean it for you. Tesla has shown us videos of that robot, so they'll perhaps have Tesla service centers that can clean it for you. But if the economics get good enough, I can see a family having, say, 2 Model 3s or Model 3 and a Cybercab, where if the economics work out, and I don't have any projections on the economics, they work out, you have one that goes in the fleet that pays for both of your vehicles. That gets really, really interesting. And perhaps a household has a mini fleet.
That's true. I mean, I think if you are a household with 2 or 3 cars and you have 2 or 3 for the convenience of always having one, but the reality is one sits for 80-90% of the time unused, then maybe that does get interesting. But I think the devil is very much in the details. And I think, at least from the Detroit automakers, and I guess we kind of lump Stellantis in with that, even though they're Europe now, right? It's Detroit 2.5. They've got other problems right now. Like, I don't know how ambitious they're going to be in looking that far ahead at something that may be a small revenue line right now, but maybe they should, because I feel like they're going to need to bridge to a future, whatever that looks like. And one of my big questions right now with the tariffs is, how do you continue like R&D investments writ large? Like, back to BP. I think that the answer is going to be there's not nearly as much R&D, and you are going to leave yourselves further vulnerable to challenges from the new American automakers. Rivian, Lucid, Tesla, maybe the Chinese as well at some point, depending on how the tariffs continue to work out.
So if you look at Stellantis, they have a gem of a brand that's been completely mismanaged in Jeep. Could we ever see the point where Stellantis spins out Jeep as its own independent brand and perhaps segues it into autonomy? It basically becomes the autonomous version of Rivian, where you're living this Jeep lifestyle?
That's an interesting question, like two-part question. Do I see Stellantis spinning Jeep out? Yes. I think that there's some value to be created there. Do I see Jeep as the autonomy brand? I feel like people who own Jeeps are people who love to drive and love to drive off-road. Maybe I look more toward what GM has done with Cadillac as the way that Stellantis could approach rolling out autonomy. Like, I think it's more of a luxury feature, not necessarily one that off people who want that adventure lifestyle are clamoring for. Even though I think, and I have not tested the Rivian driver assist systems, but I think, I don't know what I think about Rivian. Like, I think it's not the brand to me. That Jeep does not scream to me like this is where we need to roll out autonomy. So elsewhere with Stellantis.
But what if Jeep started rolling it out in confined ODDs, regulatory aside? You look at Pacific Beach and San Diego, surf community. You roll it out in surf communities on the East Coast and West Coast to start to build that buzz and build the brand equity. Because that, to me, yes, you can still have the human-driven version of the Jeep brand, but there's the coolness factor is not there anymore. The Wagoneer try to compete with the Range Rover. It didn't work too successfully. They have to build that cachet. So perhaps they roll out, call them Jeep AV or Jeep Autonomy or Sergeant Jeep or something silly, or Surf Jeep, and you roll them out in these and start to kind of build that buzz and get into the culture and get into the hype. Very similar to what when Rivian started popping up. I remember it was in Aspen skiing years ago. There was Rivian there trying to get into that outdoor lifestyle brand.
I guess I could see that, and I think it does kind of speak to the reality that I think like 95% of miles driven with Jeeps are on public roads. It's the outdoor off-road aspiration, but the reality is most people are using them on public roads most of the time. So maybe that does work.
They have aspirations. You look at Aspirations. In your opinion, does GM or Ford have any true aspirations to do a level 4 vehicle? Are they going to stick to their guns on this big ADAS pin?
That is a great question. I think GM at the very least talks the best game about it. I think the last 3 quarterly earnings calls, Mary Barra has talked about the personally owned autonomous vehicle, in the cruise role in that in some way. So they're at least talking a good game about that very long road to get there. But I think for the foreseeable future, it's clearly going to be more sophisticated ADAS systems. And honestly, I may have said this the last time I was on, Grayson, but I feel like GM has there's potential for GM to really screw up the good thing they have, and that's Super Cruise. How they integrate Cruise with that remains to be seen, but they have a really good driver assist system right now, and that is Super Cruise. So how they add Cruise, how they go up the levels of autonomy toward, into level 3, which is still a big canyon that only one automaker has crossed in North America. That's a lot of work. So I think they're focused on that. But you asked about, Ford with Latitude too. Like, it's been very quiet, right? Where's Latitude been for 2-3 years now? I think Ford is working with Mobileye in some cases. I think you start to wonder if a Wave from the UK might be Ford's autonomy partner in the long run, or automation partner for both like level 2, level 3, and then on to personally owned autonomous vehicles. So I think really curious here. I know what GM's strategy is, but I'm very curious about what Ford's strategy is, kind of with its in-house efforts and then those others that they can license systems from.
I can clearly see the Wave system going on the Ford vehicles. Wave's currently testing very publicly on the Mach-E, so obviously they're clearly integrating into the Ford systems. And I'll go on the record and I'll state this. Wave will win a majority of Mobileye's business over the coming years. You mark my words on that. What Wave has is truly, truly special, and they're going to gain significant market share. While Ford and GM go all in on ADAS, consumers are abusing it. They don't know how to use it. They're turning it off. Because you wrote a really beautiful, brilliant piece in Automotive News about the rising fatalities on our roadways. One of the main things that you point out in your piece was speeding. The only way to really stop speeding, full autonomy. ADAS is not going to stop it. How do we stop this?
That's true. It's funny, like it's not funny actually, but we've been looking to technology to save us from all these traffic deaths and injuries that occur. And right now it's more than 40,000 a year for 3 straight years. It's going up over the long term, not down, as there's more technology added into vehicles. And yet the problems are still the same. It's drunk driving, it's speeding, it's people who don't wear their seatbelts. 48% of occupants killed are not wearing their seatbelts versus the unbelted are only about 9-10% of the overall driving population. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that does not require automated driving technology. But at the same time, automated emergency braking, one of those fundamental building blocks for the ADAS systems and full self-driving, is making a dent in the numbers. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has some pretty extensive studies that have looked at how automated emergency braking, and I think they also look at collision warning without the actual control of the braking, are bringing like front to rear crashes down at a substantial clip in the vehicles that are equipped with it. So it's a bit of a mixed bag out there as to how those numbers come down. But I think you're onto something with the fact that if we're not paying attention because we're just reading a book, then maybe sophisticated levels of autonomy can stop us from speeding and some of those behavioral problems that contribute to crashes.
And one of the biggest contributor to crashes, the phone. I can't go a day without driving, without seeing somebody on their phone. Last week, I was trying to cross the road. I'm waiting, trying to make eye contact with a lady. Lady's speeding, texting away. And so I drop a 4-letter bomb, and I got a pretty good mouth when I get going. And the lady said, "Excuse me," and then I let her have it. Because the phone is only getting distracted. And I know there was the New York Times bestseller written last year around the impact of screens in children. It's only getting worse. It's becoming an addiction.
No question.
I can't tell you the last time I was in a restaurant without looking around, without seeing at least one child on a tablet or a child on a phone. And the worst thing that I've ever seen, I was in the airport last week. This was sad. This child had this little harness around his neck. Boy must have been, I'll say 5 or 6 years old. Little harness around his neck. Can't get to an iPad. And he's walking around, Pete, staring down at the iPad. That's sad. Now imagine, let's just say that child's 6. I didn't talk to the kid, but let's say he's 6. I'm going to be generous here. We're going to fast forward 12 years. The child's 18. Get his driver's license. That little tablet that he's had here for all those years, that's going to be here in front of his face. So to me, it all says Waymo was right when they pivoted from their L2 Plus system early on because of all the stuff that Astor Teller and Sebastian Thrun will tell you about all the distractions to go full autonomy. Is full autonomy the real answer and the only way that we can solve this carnage that's happening on our roadways, unfortunately, each and every year?
I don't think it's the only way, but I do think it is one of the tools that will be available that does, over the long road, start to bring the fatality numbers down. Again, back to some of the other issues. We have infrastructure problems that lend themselves to bad driver behavior. We speed because roads are made for throughput and speeding. That's one of the reasons, right? We don't have a real cultural standard in this country that takes on drunk driving like other countries do. Like other countries don't have this problem, nearly to the extent that we do. So I think lowering the national law to 0.05 would be a good step in the right direction, or just a further awareness and education around the fact that we shouldn't be driving while drinking or ingesting other substances. You don't see it in Japan. You don't see it in Germany. So I think those are other ways besides autonomy that get that number down from 40,000 plus.
Unfortunately, where you do see drunk driving, And it's the point where the culture talks about it in Europe is Greece. The individuals in Greece will talk about how dangerous the roads are because of all the drunk drivers.
Interesting.
And so if you look at the Greek market, Uber's regulated; they're all taxis, but yet those individuals don't want to go into the taxis. They're very cheap, by the way. They want to drive their own vehicles. So that's an outlier market that kind of reminds me of this market. Is that sense of independence. The heck with you. I want to be independent. We saw that during the financial crisis, but that's a whole different economic conversation. The thing that I can't wrap my head around, I have a group of guys and we go out every week for dinner. We're the three amigos and we go have a good time. We have one rule, Pete, when we go out. Nobody's allowed to drive. And we all Uber. That's our rule. And we make a pack and when we do it, I got to dinner with my wife. I might have a cocktail or I might not have a cocktail. I still don't drive. With Uber being available for all seemingly practical purposes under 10 minutes in any practical area of the United States, why are people still drinking and driving?
I think it's back to the greatest thing about owning your own car is it's convenient. It's ready for you just about 100% of the time, exactly when you want it ready. I think there's also this isn't going to happen to me kind of element to it where, if you've done it 10 or 20 or 100 times, you think that, the accident's not going to happen to you, but it does, So I think those are some of the factors that play into it. It's obviously a really hard problem to solve. A lot of good people have been dedicated their careers and lives to trying to prevent it. And maybe the numbers would be worse without their efforts.
There's amazing individuals that have put their heart and souls into trying to stop this. But the problem is, Pete, with this market sell-off over the last week and a half here, stress has gone up. And what happens when stress goes up? Drinking goes up. What else goes up? Bad behavior, misjudgment goes up. And it's going to be a very, very, very scary time on our roads. And something really, truly has to be done. And then I started to notice this trend. This is a spooky trend. I noticed it about 5-6 years ago, but now it's real fully accelerated. What if I buy a Tesla? Can it take me home from the bar? I can't tell you how many times over the last 3 to 6 months somebody's asked me if it could drive me home drunk. That's a little spooky there. That's not really talked about yet, but that's spooky. What are your thoughts on that trend?
Well, I definitely would agree that we're in the early stage, even after 5 and 6 years. We're still in the early stages of that trend, but I think it's problematic because the bottom line is a licensed human driver still needs to be behind the wheel and responsible for the vehicle operations at all times, even as the sophistication of the performance is increasing, right? Level 2, level 3 still rely on a human driver. At level 2, the human is always responsible, no matter what's controlling the vehicle. Level 3 gets more complicated because the vehicle can take control and responsibility, but there's that asterisk, which is a big one, that you human better be there to serve as the backup at all times. So I think legally, until you get to level 4, this idea that our cars can drive us home after we've had a few too many pops out, that's legally problematic to me. So I don't think we solve that problem until we get to fully autonomous level 4 operations. But to your point, I think people are misusing and abusing that out there in the real world.
So the only true level 4 system at scale now is Waymo, because you could sit in the back seat, you could pass out drunk in there. People are making adult entertainment movies back there. You do all sorts of things in the Waymo when the vehicle drives. When we get to personally owned, is the only way to truly solve this where the person can go into the bar and get completely shit-faced to remove the steering wheel and remove the pedals? Is that really the only way to do that? And if it is, when do we see movement from NHTSA, but potentially to remove that regulation, that barrier?
Well, I mean, this gets really into a nook and cranny here, Grayson, because if you think about a Waymo vehicle has the steering wheel and pedals, right? What's to prevent a drunk person from trying to commandeer control? I think that's a risk in some way by having the control. So when do we get to FMVSS that allows for a vehicle that does not conform to standards to be on the road? Maybe it'll be the Zoox Robotaxi, but maybe we're going to wind up waiting longer for that anyway, right? That's still the main test case that's out there. And as the Washington Post reported last month, it sounds like it's not going their way.
No, Zoox having a lot of issues. They didn't even use automotive grade glass, as the Washington Post pointed out. That was a little eye opening alarm there. But about a month ago, the LA Times did a wonderful story about an individual, not making any comment on this individual. He decided he wanted to take a Waymo for a joyride, jumps into the front seat and tries to unlock it. Couldn't unlock the wheel, which was really interesting. There's all these safety mechanisms in there, but you are getting people tempted. There was a photo on Reddit yesterday, this is Sunday, that was very scary. Somebody shot a Waymo. There's bullet holes in a Waymo. That's scary. Then we had this vandalism towards the Waymo. We're seeing individuals in the Waymo that got spray painted on when they're there. There's all this vandalism towards it, which is morally and ethically wrong because it endangers the passengers, and it's bad for society. But you're right. If Waymo removed the steering wheel, which they're trying with the Zeekr, which, by the way, was a complete unforced error, it's Waymo's biggest unforced error to date.
It was a beautiful vehicle, though. The canary in the coal mine with the tariffs, perhaps. But I love the design of the vehicle itself. Is it an unforced error? Probably no question. But that was under the Biden administration.
President Trump would tell you it was a beautiful vehicle. Absolutely. The most beautiful vehicle you ever seen if it was made in America. Notice how the Hyundai vehicles are made in Savannah, Georgia. Does that get accelerated for Waymo, do you think? Because Waymo obviously supply constrained right now. The Zeekrs are in trouble. Does that Hyundai get accelerated?
I think that there's no question they're going to have to fast track it because I don't know the extent that they were continuing to add the JLRs to the fleet, but now those are subject to the tariff too. So if they had any thoughts about continuing to bridge with the Jaguars, that's also now out the door. So I think what's behind door number 3 for Waymo, it's got to be a fast track Hyundai collaboration. By the way, Grayson, did you see, Hyundai has big plans to expand its footprint in Georgia that they talked about last week. Along with that, Boston Dynamics said that they are going to supply tens of thousands of robots for that factory expansion. Thought that was really interesting because they didn't quite use the word humanoid. So I think there may be humanoids or maybe robots of various shapes and sizes. But to me, it really opened my eyes to the probability that, let's say these tariffs do what they're intended to do and manufacturers of every stripe start bringing factories back to America, right? I don't know that they're going to create a whole lot of jobs when Hyundai and Boston Dynamics, as our exhibit A here, are talking about now staffing their big factory footprint expansion in America with robots. So be very curious to see. You may get factory investment. I don't necessarily know that human jobs come with that.
The future of the factory is automated. It's going autonomous because it's a labor efficiency issue. The robots don't take breaks. That's why I started the Council for Economic Resilience to advocate and promote this autonomy economy that is going to emerge. We have a labor shortage in this country. Robots are backfilling that. Humans will go into highly specialized roles, but yes, they are all going to go to automation. You can point your finger at a lot of different scenarios. You can point your finger at unions for what they're doing. You can point your finger at a variety of different things, but all the factories are going to go automated at the end of the day. It's going to become a magnificent growth market.
Do you see jobs coming with that to what extent would you imagine a factory of the future? What percentage of its workforce is robot versus human?
So how do you want to define the future? You want to define the future 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How do you want to define the future?
Let's go 10.
Probably robots 10 to 20%, maybe 25% of the workforce capacity in the next decade.
Okay. I think that would be ballpark where I would land too.
You're still going to have a lot of human jobs. The jobs are just going to be different and they're not going to be as dangerous. If you look at from a healthcare perspective, which is not talked a lot about, the dangers on shop floors, the impacts that has on the healthcare, what we pay for all those costs are going to come down because they're going to go to safer jobs, more efficient jobs. The robots are going to do the dangerous jobs. Okay, robot gets nicked, no big deal. Human gets nicked up, you got to go to the ER, you got to follow the paperwork. Robot, okay, keep going. There's a lot of societal changes that we haven't begun to scratch the surface on, and one of them is the lowering of healthcare costs, which are completely running away today.
No question. If lower healthcare costs are part of the mix, I think that's a very palatable way for many people to adjust to the changes that are coming.
The changes are coming. Robotaxis are scaling. You're seeing some pushback from Uber and Lyft drivers that are nervous, but Lyft is out there very publicly talking about they're going to build a hybrid network. But what Autonomy and what Waymo has done is given a consistent product. It's a consistent experience, a clean vehicle, a safe vehicle. And I keep going back to emotions. The inside out folks are not living in the Waymo driver's head. And some of the safety videos that Waymo's put on X are just absolutely amazing. And Waymo recently announced that they're expanding to DC. To me, a brilliant move that's going to accelerate potentially a national framework, because when somebody goes and say autonomy is bad, well, the staff or the elected official go for ride a Waymo. This was great. Brilliant move on Waymo's part, just from a pure policy perspective. What are your thoughts on their expansion to DC?
No question. I think that, it's exactly what you just said. They are, in addition to unlocking another city where I think there's good business to be had, a lot of people taking taxis or rideshare around. And I think now that people making the big decisions are going to have lots of firsthand experience. So I think that it does accelerate in a positive way the national framework that's needed to ensure autonomous vehicles can be deployed. The other, by the way, Grayson, the other interesting Waymo development here in recent weeks was they're now mapping around the San Francisco airport. If you remember, it's been very contentious with the airport authority to let robotaxis of any stripe around the airport. So this signals a shift, and I think for Waymo, it really signals the maturation of the Bay Area market writ large, right? Because they started out in San Francisco proper. They've added like Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Palo Alto more recently, and now they're closing the gap with the airport, which is, on a per ride basis, airports are one of the more lucrative, maybe the most lucrative, ride hailing rides to be given. So if they can do that, I think it really speaks to the maturity of their business.
So SFO is going to come online. Then San Jose is going to come online. Then LAX is going to come online. The positive economic benefits to those communities from a tourist perspective are going to be astronomical. We're seeing Arizona's touting about the positive impact that Waymo's had on the Phoenix metro region's economy. Same thing's going to happen with this. When Waymo goes into SFO, does Uber and Lyft have a cow? Because I'm not going to project numbers because we don't have any data to project numbers. So let's just say 1%, maybe 0.5% or 1.5% of those rides start going to Waymo and starts growing gradually. Do they have a cow?
Yeah, I think it's highly problematic if you're Uber or Lyft. If you have a competitor eating into one of your more profitable aspects of your business, and knowing that it's directionally only going to increase, that's problematic. It kind of speaks to the bigger question that's out there, which is, we see a lot of, we see the Uber Waymo partnerships in Austin and Atlanta. I think, don't quote me on that, but I think those are the two. Then you see Lyft starting to partner with Mobileye and May Mobility. So these frenemy partnerships are just really interesting overall. And I think, what does each side gain from each is going to be interesting to follow as this plays out over several years.
We look at this playing out over several years. So you're right. It's Austin and Atlanta. Waymo's exclusively available on Uber. Uber, I know you listen. You got to put an AV tier. Let's fast forward. So we're 2025. Let's fast forward to 2027. If Atlanta and Austin, the two A markets, are the only Uber Waymo markets, that sends a pretty big message there that Waymo's going at this alone. What do you think?
It does. And I think that, if I'm going to answer my question from before, I think these partnerships are really beneficial for Waymo and other AV players in the short term, because they're going to get to scale really quick or faster than they would have. But to me, if those are the only two, it signals that Waymo thinks it's going to get there on its own sooner rather than later, which is more problematic if you're one of the traditional ride-hailing companies.
So if Waymo continues their expansion, their ride increases their reporting quarter over quarter, we're going to find out in the next earnings call. We'll get an update there. Who can compete from a Robotaxi perspective? Does Waymo have the market wrapped up? Because I know I'm harsh on it from time to time, but Zoox is just full of head fakes, starts, rewinds. I don't see any which way that Zoox can even compete outside of Amazon's cash. I don't see any way that they can compete.
That's a big asterisk, Grayson. Like, I think Amazon's cash can help them catch up in a hurry once they're ready. And of course, when are they going to be ready is the $1 million question. I guess I wouldn't rule Zoox out at this point, but I think the other answer to your question is who else can compete? Like, in theory, Tesla and Tesla's Robotaxi plans would be, they're the ones who can deploy a fleet at scale very quickly with an over-the-air update. Whether or not it works well enough for it to be considered safe is a big question mark. We'll start getting answers in June, but I think at least in North America right now, that Tesla would be the competitor to keep my eyes on.
Because Tesla manufactures their vehicles in America. That's a huge competitive advantage that they have the ability to manufacture vehicles cheaply at scale on the June front. A lot of hype. It's not just Elon. There's a lot of individuals that work at Tesla that are on X talking about this very confidently.
Well, I mean, if you think about how Elon has said that they're a year or two away for 10 years, I think what's different now is they said, okay, this is coming in June. It's, when they say that in February or so, like that's very different than like, oh, we're just another, over the horizon points away from this. Like putting that time frame on it really makes it seem like it better be real this time, at least.
What do you think the ODD is? Is it going to be around the Austin Bergam Airport, towards Giga, towards the SH-130, the toll road, or is this going to be downtown? I don't see downtown. Where do you see this actually going?
It's a great question. I think given how it took Waymo a significant amount of time just to bring Phoenix Sky Harbor online, and now SFO, just about 2 years into their public service in San Francisco, I don't see Tesla starting at the airport, I guess just based on that history of the industry. I do see it being highly geofenced, probably key corridors downtown out to the factory.
So when I said airport, just to clarify this, I don't mean going into the airport. If you look there's a big chunk of land between the airport and Giga. And so it's like, okay, so this is it's not a dense area. To say, okay, we did it because it's a very controlled environment. I started studying maps and I went down there and actually looked at it in person. It's wide open, not a lot of risk. Downtown Austin, I think that's risky. I was in those cruise vehicles when they were operating there and it wasn't very good downtown. And I'm saying that politely, by the way. I could say something else, but I'm going to be polite, Grayson, today. So you really think downtown in June?
I mean, I feel like that's where the business is, right? Like in your densest part of they can say they're only going to operate on certain streets, right? Like to your point, like what is the ODD of this service they're rolling out? Is it going to be really useful and go to a lot of places off the bat? Or is it really going to be more of a stunt that they can say, yes, we've met this June deadline. We're now running this. We're running 3 roads between the factory and, various points. It remains to be seen what we're going to see in June. And that's kind of brings us to another Texas development, and that is Aurora any moment now is going to roll self-driving trucks with no humans aboard in commercial service down I-45. And it remains to be seen, like, what happens then? Like, are we talking like 2 trucks do it and they say we have met our obligation to, launch trucks by the end of April 2025? How does that scale up over time? Like, are we going to get to, I don't know, let's say 36 trucks by the end of this year that are running that route on a consistent basis?
36 trucks by the end of the year? No, I believe they'll get to 12 trucks by the end of the year, and then the following year, I would say by April, May, maybe 18 to 22 trucks. By June, July, 24 to 26 trucks. So Aurora is going to take a very methodical, smart approach to this. And you had Nat Buse on your podcast, and we had Nat Buse on here, and an extremely smart individual, in my opinion, the smartest mind in safety in autonomy today. I say that because Steve Kenner's currently retired. Steve's a wonderful man, but Nat is a leading influential figure out there in safety, and they're not taking chances, and they're building this right. And they're going to do it in April. I truly believe they're going to do it this month. I can't wait. To me, it's going to be a historic moment in autonomy, because they're not just going to do this Hi, we did it, and turn the lights off. They're going to keep going back and forth operating commercial service. Bot's going to start operating driver out commercial service in Houston. So it's a really big monumental moment for autonomous trucking in Texas. We're going to play the parlor game here because I want to go on the record with this because I have an opinion and I want your opinion. Aurora has two very public partners, Volvo, PACCAR. Who do you think is going to be the driver out partner and why?
I'm going to think, if we're going on the record here, we don't know on April 7th, right? I think it's PACCAR. Why? I've heard from several people over several months who have firsthand experience that the Volvo VNL was difficult. They were having kind of unforeseen integration problems.
I 100% agree with you. It is going to be the PACCAR, and I say that because of the long engineering expertise they've had with that truck. And that was the truck that I went on a safety ride with, so I believe it will be the PACCAR Peterbilt. When that moment happens and they start operating daily, consistent driver out routes, how do you think the autonomy market reacts? Do they look at this as a moment in history, or does everybody stand up and cheer and applaud? How do you think they look at that?
I think it's the latter because, like you said before, this is a historic moment. Like, this is something that Chris Urmson has been working on for decades, right? He's the father of the modern day industry in many respects. And now he will have a product in play on public roads. So I think to do that with a 70,000 pound Class 8 truck is an accomplishment. There's no doubt. And this trucking space has been red hot with a lot of talk, certainly over the last few months, maybe the last year. And, and there's various permutations of that are already like seeing some early success, like Kodiak Robotics deploying trucks in commercial operation on private road. Like, that's useful, right? And that is also to be applauded. And I don't want to forget that. But I think that kind of brings back to like the question of all these. We just talked about Tesla, Aurora, and I added Kodiak there. Like, in reality, it's not about like the magic moment that's first, right? It's about how useful is this? How quickly is it useful? Like, how useful will the Tesla Robotaxis be in Austin and get to a point where they're providing meaningful service for a wide number of riders? How quickly does Aurora get dozens or hundreds of trucks on the road, go beyond I-45, and make this like really useful to a wide number of users? Like, that's the premise, right? Kodiak already doing that. They have found a useful use case, and I bet that can be replicated elsewhere too, as they work toward public roads, and they're doing defense work too. So that's what I'm really like curious is like how quickly do these become meaningful revenue streams for these businesses?
Autonomy is becoming a business. Next 5 years become meaningful revenue streams. You're going to see a significant growth increase because the technology is going to be scalable. The growing labor shortage, which are only going to accelerate because of the current policies. What nobody's really talking about, and I'll say this very bluntly, the current policies as it relates to labor, trade, and tariffs are only going to accelerate the adoption of automation and autonomy. And it's only going to benefit the Kodiaks, the Auroras of the world, and the Waymos. It's going to benefit everybody working in autonomy. And that's why we're so focused on it. I think we're going into, Trump wants to call this the golden age. Borrowing his tagline, we're going into the golden age of automation, and the Trump policies are going to take us there. Pete, there's a lot changing. There's a lot moving in the markets. We're going to have you on, and let's say next month, because I love having you on. What do we need to look for over the next month in the autonomy market?
I mean, it's almost, I think whatever we're going to look for, Grayson, is going to be a byproduct of the current economic situation where we're watching the markets tank. And back to kind of where we started with some of the traditional automakers, what is the ramification of the tariffs on number of vehicles sold in the U.S. this year? I'm seeing some like really dire predictions out there from the likes of Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. We're looking at 2 to 3 million fewer sales than we would have. That's interesting because a lot got pulled. It'll be interesting to see what got pulled forward into March and what didn't. So, but the projections out there are pretty dire. We're watching the markets, shed trillions of dollars. So I guess my question will be that we can come back to next month is what effect will that have on investments to get automation off the ground?
The markets are volatile. The IPO window is closed right now, so we're going to watch that. But even with its close, even its policies, it could potentially accelerate investments in automation and autonomy because investors want to get ahead of this emerging trend. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is building an automation business. Pete, as always, sir, I love having you on the road to autonomy. So thank you so much, as always, for coming on the show.
You bet, Grayson. I'll be here anytime you ask.
All right, you got a deal, sir.